Welcome, everybody. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the great and the one and only Luke Metcalfe from Microburbs. I'm a massive fan of Luke, and you'll come to see why very shortly, guys. You all know that I'm obsessed with data, and Luke is another Kingsman that not only is obsessed with data, has made it his lifelong passion to help mum and dad investors with investing in Australian property using data. And so therefore it removes all biases, it removes all stereotypes and so forth. So a very warm welcome, Luke.
Thank you very much for having me, John. Always good to be talking to you.
Thank you. I'm a big fan of yours, mate. I'm a big groupie. So apologies if I'm gushing with my praise for you and your firm. So very warm welcome.
Thank you very much.
So Luke, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so my background, I did computer law at university, but I was much more interested in the computer side, not just programming so much as I was really interested in data and how it could tell things that no one else knew. So I was always on the back end in my early jobs, looking up, creating interesting views of data and informing where the business should go. So I always really cared about, how do people actually make money with data? So I'm a curious guy. I like to bring together data from lots of sources. And I built and sold a couple of data businesses also in the reference space. So it's always been about democratizing data, making it available to regular people. People, as you mentioned, people have all these biases. And so I've always been about making sites that can make it clear for people so that they can make the right decisions and lead better lives. So yes, I'm a data scientist. I love to get in and do machine learning. I can write code. I try and get others to do code so I can run the business as much as possible. But yeah, everything I do is really informed on what is really going on, what's the truth behind stuff, and how can it be used to predict future outcomes, which is always the gold standard for me. It's data turns into information if it's useful, and the most useful information is when you know what's going to happen in the future.
Hallelujah. Yeah, well said, mate. And Luke, that's a great background. And so how did Microburbs come about? Given your
So real estate, I went through the real estate process. I bought and sold several properties, and that is an absolutely classic example where maybe it's the best example of all in Australian life, where it's an extremely important decision. A lot of people get it wrong, and it's not made using data, but the data is out there. So there's all these weird and wonderful sources out there that are, sorry. There's all these weird and wonderful sources out there that people don't get access to. So the goal with Microburbs was to put it all in one place and also come up with new indicators that where the indicators aren't there. So using lots of different data sources so that basically the goal is everything that goes into the buying decision is covered off in Microburbs. Anything that really makes a difference to what the price is, what's the lifestyle, quality of life going to be, where is the price headed, how much yield are you going to get, all of those things get baked into there. So that's really the promise of Microburbs.
Yeah, it's a great website because for those of you who don't know Microburbs, it's a hyper local understanding of an area to buy in. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Luke. And the great thing is that you can put in metrics to help you understand where to buy, for example, where it's got some great capital growth appreciation. And then you could also put in a metric where you could put in how much yield you're looking for. And it's fabulous because it does give you those locations that have got the yields that you're looking for and the capital growth. And plus all these other metrics that no other website has, like lifestyle factors and HIP scores and things like that. So yeah, very interesting. And look, based on this, continuing on that discussion, I've heard you say once before that you're a competitor to CoreLogic, and most people have heard of CoreLogic, but CoreLogic seems to be the sort of big brand out there that collects all the sales information in Australia. So can you go through how you're different to CoreLogic or?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so people tend to think that we must use CoreLogic as the source. People CoreLogic is such a big brand. It's such a dominant player in the property space. People say, oh, so you're using, obviously the data is really coming from CoreLogic, right? Because that's what they see also in a whole lot of different property reports. That's the source. But actually, we don't use CoreLogic at all for anything. We use zero of their data. So we're in the business of also building our own indicators, also based on listings. So what we have in common is that we both have a very large number of listings, and we have 90 million going back to 1990.
Wow.
And so at a simple level, we're both making median prices and other real estate metrics. They do more on the macro, so they've got more of the macro side of things where they think the overall market is. We're more on the fine grained, like where is a suburb going, how valuable is a property side of things. A big difference between us is that our customer is only the buyer. So we only care about information that helps buyers, whereas their main customer is the real estate agent. So that leads to a different way of presenting things. So we don't mind, for example, if our graphs jump around a bit. So if all the buyers leave a market and suddenly that leads to a big change in price, so suddenly you have to have lower prices, we will reflect that because that's in the interest of the buyer. But if you have a whole lot of other stakeholders, you might want it to look more like a nice smooth curve, yeah?
Right.
And you might want to go back much further into the past. So a big thing we're about is like real-time information. So it's our view that everything's speeding up. So with data and the dissemination of information. So we're very much about having very real-time data. So where by the time, most of our stuff now on the real estate side of things is weekly. So it's the idea we'll have, so if there is a whole lot of sales, if a market gets all the sales leave, what happens then to the price? We're asking those kinds of questions where they're more looking at things like, 12-month, 3-month kind of area. So
Yeah, which is not as useful if you're looking to buy, right?
that's right. Yeah. So there's definitely value in what CoreLogic does. Obviously, they're big and they're very well trusted, but a problem is that everyone looks at CoreLogic data, so it doesn't give you an edge. So the big thing for us is we're not, unlike a lot of our competitors that are like making things that people ask for, we're more about how do we provide extra information by doing primary research. So we research the property market ourselves, and we are prepared to come out with indicators that people didn't quite ask for, or different ways of formulating it to really solve the buyer's problems. So I guess being a smaller company, we can be more focused on just like, how does the buyer choose the right property at the right price and not have to worry about, can real estate agents get their name out there, or can real estate agents get a whole lot of volume, or does their forecast sound good on National 9 News, or all of that stuff. So
Yeah.
we're just like buyers only, buyers agents as well. So obviously by extension,
Yeah.
that is really our mission. And in as part of that, we look more broadly than just real estate. So we're looking at amenity, socioeconomics, demographics, all kinds of stuff that influence the price. So we've got noise maps. A big difference also is that because we're using more modern algorithms, there are less blanks. So sometimes on the big competitors' reports, they will not have a price for a small suburb or a small market. But because we're using some more smarts on the back end, we can provide those particular prices so that you can act even on, you can have up-to-date information even for small towns, for example, or obscure suburbs that people look past.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I just love the way you present your information, because I mean, CoreLogic's great, but you can often listen to their reports and their talks and their speeches and so forth, but actually walk away more confused because it's too high level.
mm,
It's talking about an aggregate level of Perth, for example, or an aggregate level of Sydney. Listings are up or listings are down. But how does that really help you as a mum and dad investor? And this is where
yeah,
Microburbs is so good, because it does get down to that little town level that you're talking about. And so
yeah.
So
this is a really big point here. So traditional real estate comes at it from a macroeconomic point of view. So they're looking at big regions and inflation and all these really big things that are going on. So it's more sort of close to public policy debates and all that sort of
yeah,
stuff. But real estate, economists will admit that they have a terrible track record at predicting future outcomes. Yeah. So a lot of
yeah,
what they say, I listen to it. So I take it in and I go, yeah, that makes sense. That these models have some validity. But when it actually comes down, when the rubber hits the road and you have to know a particular suburb at a particular time, where is the price going to be in 4 years' time? Yeah. So they'll say, oh, yes, the Hobart is definitely going to come. The fundamentals are great. Yeah. But then it's like, okay, when and by how much?
and in
So
which
when
part of
you've,
Hobart,
what's that? Sorry.
and also which part of Hobart?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
So Hobart is a whole lot of different markets. So a big thing also is that it's not just suburbs. There are different pockets that aren't even adjacent to one another that behave in similar ways. They move together. You can see in the data. So it's not just like all the streets in a suburb are all highly correlated. Yeah. They're going
yeah,
in different directions. There's all these micro dynamics going on because of the reality that most properties are not for sale at any given point in time. So it's a small number for sale, and there's only a small number of buyers as well. So you have low volumes throughout, but it really matters that you still get the right price because it
yeah,
really matters for the people who are in the real estate market. Most people are not buying, most people are not selling, but so one easy way of doing that is to look at this very macro level, and there's definitely validity to looking at it. I'm not saying macro means nothing. So you definitely do. Obviously, there are big trends, but that are worth talking about, and they influence government policy and all that sort of stuff. Totally fine, but the reality is that individuals are only going to buy one property at a time, and we're really focused on that. So that particular property or that particular suburb, where is that headed? What is the right price for that particular one? And
yeah,
the reality is that as you get more fine-grained, you get more accurate because with data, what you need is lots of data. So the AI doesn't work like our brain in the sense of like, you take in a few examples and it creates an emotional reaction and, oh, I trust that guy. I just got the vibe. He's very confident. So the AI works by just having a very large amount of data on a particular thing and then learning very carefully what can it actually use to predict future outcomes. What are the bits that are really forecast quality, forecast grade, you might say, as
yeah,
opposed to all this stuff that, it sounds good, it tells a story, there's some validity to it, but it's not really stuff that you can rely on ongoing. So our big thing is like, it's less about just trends. So you shouldn't trust me. In my view, you shouldn't trust me or anyone else on whether the world is moving to work from home. Yeah, right. Yeah, maybe you've got your own view and that's fine. Maybe you can be confident about it, but pundits and forecasters in general don't have a great track record at predicting these things. And the real estate market is filled with trends. So things go up for a while and then they go down. Yeah. So it goes regional, then it goes city and all these other things. There are lots of micro trends that I'll be talking about later, smaller things like, you know, coastal and quiet and noisy and all these other things. But the big question is, how much can you rely on that ongoing? So how much can you trust it? What happens if there's another GFC or a recession or a pandemic? Yeah.
yeah,
So can you still, when the rubber hits the road, can you still rely on it? So basically, yeah, a big thing for me is that you can make it, if your forecasting brings in too much stuff, then it gets too complex. Yeah. So if it requires 16 different factors to be in line. So you say, oh, they make a forecast and then, oh no, we couldn't because then there was a change in government policy and I wasn't taking account of that. There was one of the minor parties got the balance of power in the
right.
Senate, or the RBA decided to reduce interest rates and all that sort of stuff. So the more complicated it gets, the harder it is.
The
The
forecast.
more the more factors you have, like so for me, it's like if you ask me about the Chinese property market or the Chinese, demand for iron ore, it's like I haven't modeled that. Yeah. So I'm not an expert, so I can't really talk about that. I just want to focus on the things that I know actually predict future outcomes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's fascinating. We could be here for hours for it. I know as a buyer's agent how important it is to get down to that suburb level. And I think a very wise person once told me that it's the suburb that does 70 to 80% of the capital growth. And that's why I like microburbs, because you get down to that suburb level. And core logic's great, but all that public policy debate type stuff and, macro listings and stuff, that doesn't help you or me as an investor buying that $500,000 property at all. You want to find out a lot more about the suburb you're buying in.
That's right. Yeah. So suburbs are not well priced, is what it comes down to, because of the low volumes of sales and um, vendors. Then you don't have perfect pricing. So that question of what you should pay, so you can make money when you buy, and also people lack insight into where the suburb is going. So those are the two big opportunities that you have as a buyer, and that at those two levels, pricing and forecasts, that's more where you have the room to be more certain about stuff. Whereas if you're going into macro stuff, like I don't know what's going to happen in Ukraine. Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
can't
Yeah.
claim. I'm no. I mean, I can watch it, and I can sound smart. I'm sure I could fill a podcast with smart sounding things if I researched it. But it's like, hey, I don't really have a model for it. Like I haven't
Yeah.
looked at. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, one of the things I love about your reports is how hyper local, I think you call it. It's a very hyper local understanding of what's going on. For the benefit of all the viewers, can you give us an example of what you talk about in terms of hyper local understanding?
Yeah. So beyond the suburb, we go down to pocket level on all kinds of things. So we go down to individual streets. We go down to the microburbs. So down to 120 households. And at that level, you can see that suburbs are quite diverse places. So at the most superficial level, you look at housing stock. So not, superficial as in easy to see. So you can see that there are parts of a suburb that are on a hill with large homes that are overlooking, that have district views. You have suburbs in the gullies, properties in the gullies. You have properties that are on the bush, completely different lifestyle to being on a unit on a main road, different kinds of people. So it doesn't, yeah, you really need to know the local situation. So I think everyone as a property inspector would have had the experience of seeing the same people show up as you go from inspection to inspection, even though you're going to different suburbs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're looking at you guys are probably in the same market segment that's looking at a particular kind of housing stock. Whereas if you went to a very different kind of property in the same suburb, you wouldn't see those people there. You'd be going for a completely different segment.
Yeah.
So that level of understanding down to the pocket level is really critical, and you can build better forecasting. So you can build more reliable forecasting if you create your own virtual suburbs, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, you see that. So we have things like median price, so median sale price by street. We have it by microburb, 120 households or SA1. We have the turnover rate for an individual pocket. So sometimes there's just the data looks okay, but there's a very high turnover rate, and that can raise questions, whether it be a rental turnover rate or a sales turnover rate. We cover both. So what it enables you to do is a lot more due diligence. So in a way,
Yeah.
it's sort of like being there and hanging out the street and seeing things, but we can see behind closed doors as well. So we know the demographics of the local pocket inside, even though you can't see the neighbors. We know what they look like, what they do for a living, how much money do they make, what kinds of financial situation they're in, what kind of welfare do they get, what kind of assets are they declaring, what kind of income are they
That's
getting?
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's very powerful stuff, and it is much more so from a home buyer's way of thinking. It's much more like we get a sense of how people would talk about the suburb at a dinner party or if it was locals there in the barbecue. Oh, Smith Street, the kind of person who lives on Smith Street, very different to us Jones Street people. I can't
Yeah.
believe that that property on Smith Street sold for that much. Smith Street's a dump,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
has this kind of person in there. So really trying to reflect, be as human as possible and as honest as possible about
Yeah.
individual places. And so we have lifestyle scores down to this individual pocket level. You can get a hip score, you can get a overall lifestyle score, a convenience score,
Yeah.
really looking at local conditions, because the reality is that nuisances and also great things really happen on a local level. So you or your tenant are living their lives in one home, and it's a very different thing to being in the suburb center. And it may even be increasingly these days, they won't even go to the suburb center, the local shopping strip. They'll go to the Westfield 3 kilometers away. So what do you need to know about this
Yeah.
stuff on the other side of the suburb? So yeah, going as local as possible gives you as most insights into the real dynamics of the area.
Of
What
the
is
actual
going
area.
to, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
what are the things that's going to lead it to grow? What are the things that are going to lead people to want to leave? Um, yeah, so
Yeah.
it's
I just love the reports because even within the suburb, your reports are telling you that this part over here, you're going to buy a house for $3 million, but over in this pocket over here, it's $1.2 million. Like the
mm,
variation that you're actually seeing. So you can see the street that you're looking to buy. Does it fall into the more affluent area? Does it fall into the less affluent area? I just love that. And even the noise maps, if you want to know if the street's noisy or not, and or without even being there, so you can see
yeah.
those noise maps. Like, yeah,
Yeah, very often. So people take this view when they're looking for an area, they'll just narrow down to like a region and then an LGA and then a couple of suburbs within it. They'll go, oh yeah, yeah. They look at the median prices, right? But the reality is that those various, so just from an affordability point of view, you might be able to, if you really want to be near the beach, you can't get the beachfront properties that are influencing the median prices, particularly if it's a long, wide suburb. But there are streets behind that may be way cheaper that are lower than the median price. So those ones are in your price range. You might miss them because you're just looking at all the medians, the typical house. So it's much more about, because there's so many local things. You go into a gully or it's just not as
yeah,
nice for whatever reason, but it's like there's smaller blocks, and it's like that is much better, much more suited to the property search.
yeah. That's a really great point because those median prices that you look at in other websites can make you believe that that everything is homogeneous, and yet here you are saying in your report there's a little pocket over here that's just well and truly under the median price, and that could be your entry into that suburb.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
and look, just talking about the products that are available on microburbs.com.au. That's correct.
Yep.
Yeah. Um, what would you say are the top two reports that people purchase from your company?
Yeah, so there's suburb reports, and I can run through those. That includes things like noise maps as well. Uh, and yeah, so suburb reports are really big. And then there's our suburb finder tool, which enables you to narrow down to the suburb. So it's like I want this much HIP score, I want this much yield, I want at least this much capital growth. In fact, I want as much capital growth as possible. These are the regions. Please just go in and specify it, and you get a table that you can turn into a spreadsheet, download, and just get that. So that's like querying our database of the most top level real estate market indicators, also taking into account things like risk and amenity in there. So it's a easy tool for narrowing down when you're asking yourself what suburb should you go in. So that way you can look across broader areas just to find, hey, look, that particular suburb there, the price has been too low for too long, and we should go in for that. Even though I was thinking more centered on this area, these are the specific opportunities over a wider range.
Gotcha.
And then
Right.
the suburb
So
report is more like, okay, now I want to know more about this suburb. Do I feel confident buying in there? And looking at price graphs and things, and then where in the suburb is good to buy because of all this hyper local
yeah.
information.
All right. So in summary, correct me if I'm wrong. The idea is that you would go into the first report called Suburb Finder, and you'd put in your budget, say $500,000, and some metrics that you'd be interested in. For example, a yield of 5.5% and capital growth projections of, say, I don't know, 6%. Then that will spit out a number of suburbs. And I'm keeping it simple here. You can put in other metrics. That'll spit out a number of suburbs. And then then you go off and you can, for the same price, you get access to the suburb report. So
That's
say,
right.
for example, it brought up Ascot Smithfield, and Paradise Vale. You can then go off and get 3 suburb reports based on the metrics that was provided in a suburb finder report. And
Mm.
then, right, okay. And then
Yep,
you can
yep.
get,
So you narrow down based on your criteria, and then you can go into detail. Okay, what are these suburbs really about? What's the lifestyle? What are the amenity scores, and what are the streets like, and all of that? Yes.
yeah, it's great because, most people don't know where to look, and Suburb Finder allows you to find those suburbs where to look. And then you've got a lot more information in the suburb report that can help you, double check what you're looking for, so that you can make an informed decision, a proper decision. Now, I hear that there are some new reports coming out, Luke.
Mm.
Do you want to give us a little bit of a hint of what they are and when they'll become available?
Yes, property reports. We are in the background. We've been working hard on this. So the idea of the individual property reports, obviously you put in an exact address and you get a report on a particular property. So that's bringing together all the kinds of stuff you'll see in the suburb reports, but making it relevant relative to a particular property. So that property is in the middle of the map. And, even if it's on the edge of the suburb, it's going to take into account all the stuff around that property. So it's going to be, the idea is every aspect of life we want to cover within that, and as much about the building as possible as well.
Okay.
So things that affect price, and some things also affect capital growth. So we've got our hyper local demographics down to 120 households. We've got
Wow.
all these livability scores down to the 120 household level. So that's like a couple of blocks usually for Australian suburbia. And local socioeconomics, income, affluence score, what class, how much money are they making from rental income? And actually, that one is more broad. But yeah, where people work, and what kind of jobs they have, proximity to a wide range of amenity, including schools, and then how
Okay.
those schools actually perform in the NAPLAN.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
School catchments, noise. So I don't know of anyone else who has noise maps.
No, I've never heard of that either.
Yep. And so that's very hyper local. That's much more than just the 120 households. That's more like probably a handful of households. And yeah, then nearby
Look, sorry to
DAs.
interrupt. And does these property reports also give you a capital growth prediction and or a yield prediction?
I think they will. Yes, for the suburb level, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. Even at least at a suburb level. Yeah,
And we'll be working towards individual. So our goal is to get as fine grained as possible. So we want to get to the individual property level forecast.
wow. I can't wait. It's so exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Luke, when do you think you'll be making these property reports available? When are you going live?
I think August. So we're going to be alpha testing them next month. So we're recording now in June. So I hope that we can have a beta out by August 2024.
Fantastic. That's a massive project that I'm sure you're excited to come to.
Oh, everyone wants property reports. There's no two ways about it. People look at a lot more properties than they look at suburbs. And so yeah, we're very excited to bring all that down. It's very much core to our mission of keeping it very relevant and to the actual properties, the actual experience people have of like, should I buy this property? How much should I put in as a price for this property? At what point should I walk away? So all these things are very core to us in our mission of empowering the buyer.
Yeah, can't wait. Yeah, then the reports at the moment are fantastic. So for those of you who are watching, go to microburbs.com.au and invest a very modest amount to find your suburb finder and then the suburb report. It's very modest. The alternative to that is how expensive it is if you make a wrong decision in the wrong suburb, for example. Yeah, you can pay me later, Luke. Luke, one final question. I know you're busy, so I wanted to ask you about you spoke about AI and machine learning. What do you think, in your opinion, where is property data going? Can you see anything in the future as to how property data is going to be changing? And any example would be tremendous.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, with all this whiz bang tech, I've been a startup guy for a long time, and you get a bit of cynicism along with it. So I tend to take a realist approach for any future technology, and that is the core of it is like, does it really help the people, the intended customer, and do they recognize that it helps it? So what are the big two problems of buyers? So one is that investors don't actually perform on average very well in the property market. They underperform home buyers. Many actually lose money. 70 something percent of them only get one property, which is usually not enough to achieve financial freedom. So they're making the wrong choices. And they almost never consider all of the factors. So that, and there's two levels of this. It's like all of the things that everyone understands are important. Like you don't want to be in a flood zone and bushfires. People buy without learning that stuff, easements and all of that. So, and then there is like a deeper understanding of markets that involves looking at a whole lot of curves that an AI can do. And then broadly speaking, also, I think from an emotional point of view, it's very stressful and intimidating, particularly your first couple of properties. So, there's an issue of trust between vendors and buyers and sellers agents. There's a fear of overpaying. There's a fear of missing out. And so I think there's a lot that can be done to give people confidence. And so what I see is that data can really make it more provable and more scientific what it is that you're doing is one thing, and also do that due diligence for you. So doing all of these checks like we have for bushfires and mobile black spots and all these other things that it's just too much for any person to do, that people have day jobs, they have lives. It's too much to keep doing that over and over again. Even more broadly speaking, if you're doing it for a while, it's tiring and one property blurs into another. Yeah, it just gets too much. So you can get yourself a good buyer's agent, or you can like be assisted by technology, or both. Preferably you want both. So where I see data going, to answer your question, I see that things are speeding up. So you can see in the data that it was much easier to find mispricing opportunities in the 1990s before people were aggregating stuff. Our data goes back that far.
Right.
So markets are come and go faster. And so there's an analogy to what happened in the stock market. So in the stock market, most trades are actually done by bots. People don't listen. Macroeconomic forecasts aren't the only thing for working out whether you buy a particular stock. You want to know the fundamentals and the technical trading situation of a particular stock. So you see an analogy between companies and suburbs. So what you're getting is better pricing overall. So then basically overall, there's a massive shift from intuition versus data. That's been the conversation up until now.
Right.
And now increasingly it's like data versus special data or exclusive data. So everyone in the stock market is acting on data. Everyone looks at all these various metrics to do with companies. Now everyone's got a CoreLogic report. So CoreLogic's been great in bringing more data to the market. But if everyone's armed with that same information, you don't get an edge. So we've got current situation where investors are not performing that well, and they're all acting on the same information. So you need to have special data. You need to go over and above, and you want that data to be as scientifically proven as possible. You don't want it to be just a story. You want it to be you want the AI to have learned over a very large range of suburbs. So the benefit of having 90 million listings is that even though the AI doesn't think like us and can't look at a property in the same way we do just yet, but it can learn from a very large number of markets, and it's seen so much more. So that level of experience is much greater than what a human can do, where they can study things and they can make spreadsheets and they can have intuitions, but it just doesn't have that same forecasting performance as an algorithm.
Yeah,
So
because it's unemotional. It's just going to grab all
mm,
that data and spit it out based on history.
that's
Whereas
right.
you and I as humans, we are by nature biased. You are
Absolutely.
absorbing media. You are influenced by mum and dad. You are influenced by the rich uncle who got lucky.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
So there's all these biases. So
yeah,
one might be simply exasperation, where you go, oh, let's just buy. Let's just buy. I'm sick of this. Let's just make it happen. I want to close a book. That's not really a decision based on, is that actually the right price for the property? Does it actually tell you where it's going to go? Or it may be stubbornness. So it's like, oh, they're asking for 1.2, but if they're asking for 1.2, there's no way I'm going to offer more than 1.1. That's just how it is. They've got to give some as well. I've come down a bit, so they have to come down. So
yeah,
there's more sort of like the psychology of
yeah,
of bidding. There's the different players. Oh, I like that real estate agent, so I'm going to do what maybe he will sell my property later. So
yeah.
all of these other sort of
Other
personal things,
things
AI
come
doesn't
into it.
care about any of that. It's like it doesn't. It just will come up with a price. Yeah, this is where the
I,
suburb's going to be in
yeah,
4 years' time based on its experience. It doesn't get tired, it doesn't get exasperated. It just makes a forecast. And another thing is it can tell you how accurate the forecast, what confidence range it can provide for it as well. So it's like, it's not just going, oh, look, I'm definitely confident. Oh, I'm pretty confident. And then you talk to them a bit more about it and their confidence level goes up or down based on other things that aren't front of mind. So that's another bias of humans is we've got certain things at the front of our mind and we've got an overall attitude. Whereas the machine doesn't get influenced by that. It's just like, what's the price? What's the chance that you're going to want to sell this property within 4 years? Seeing a high turnover rate, for example.
yeah.
Uh,
Or what's the chance of it getting a 6% capital growth over the next 5 years?
exactly.
That sort
Yeah.
of stuff. Yeah, it's an amazing era we're living in because I remember growing up looking at the back of magazines and those predictions, which were pretty flawed if you really think about it now. And this whole new era that we're in at the moment, let alone what AI is bringing, is amazing.
Mm.
Luke, to wrap things up, how can people find you? Where's your website? If they have any more questions, is there any way they can reach out to you or one of your staff members?
Microburbs.com.au. So it's a site that everything that we provide, there's free samples. So you can try out our suburb finder tool. You just can't get capital growth, but you can get in and specify prices. Our suburb reports, we have sample reports. You can put in any suburb and get a taster. So we're very much about, okay, it's not just I'm here trying to spruik some paid site and you got to dish out money to work out whether it's worthwhile. It's very important for us that everyone can understand very much what they're going to get before they dish out any cash. And there's a lot of people there's various stuff that we have, like public housing, that people get for free from us, and that's totally fine. So we have 2,000 people a day on the site. Most of them are free. And yeah, so it is part of our mission just to educate the general public as well. So it's a freemium kind of site where you can gain a lot of insight just by clicking around and seeing useful data points.
And it's wonderful. So by all means, ladies and gentlemen, go into microburbs.com.au and have a look at the free reports because I guarantee once you see them, you'll go, wow, this is amazing. And of course, as investors, you want to see what capital growth you're going to get. And Microburbs is a fantastic tool for you to find those suburbs that will give you the capital growth and the yield that you're looking for. So, Luke, thank you very much, mate. Look forward to having you again on another podcast. And yeah, thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much, John.